Among the early pioneers to Des Moines were Robert and Elisabeth Losh. They were married in 1841 and came west to Des Moines in 1872. The 1899 obituary of Elisabeth says, "They celebrated their golden anniversary 9 years earlier, and perhaps at the time of her death, they had been married longer than any other couple in Iowa." The 1909 obituary of Robert, who was then 89 years old, recalls that he was the father of 14 children, the grandfather of 76, and the great-grandfather of 56 great-grandchildren. Seeing their gravestone today, one can visualize so many children and grandchildren visiting the burial site that perhaps it is not surprising that the white stone now seems to be rubbed nearly smooth over the last 120 years. With so many family members, it's safe to assume that they had a large impact in Des Moines. One grandchild of Robert was Dr. Clifford Losh Sr. He was a doctor for the city of Des Moines in the early 1900s. Both Dr. Clifford Losh Sr. and his son, Dr. Clifford Losh Jr., served as medical chief of staff for Mercy Hospital in Des Moines in the early years. Much of this information was courtesy of Ron Riddle of Des Moines, a resident and also the great-great-great-grandson of Robert and Elisabeth. Robert Losh's last address places him in a house that would now sit in the Sec Taylor Stadium parking lot between 2nd and 3rd Avenues to the west of the stadium. Ron's great aunt recalled that as a young girl, at the time of the death of Robert Losh, she remembers crossing a levee and climbing to a house where the man was laid out in the living room. Like so many of those in Woodland Cemetery, the legacy of those early pioneers is not so much the simple grave markers, but instead the many descendants that continue to make our capital city special.